They say some places never truly die, but linger, breathing forgotten histories and unspeakable terrors into the present. In the heart of the Santa Clara Valley stands a sprawling Victorian mansion that defies all logic and reason. It is a labyrinth of wood and glass, born not of architectural ambition, but of absolute consuming terror. The Winchester Mystery House remains a physical manifestation of grief, a sprawling puzzle built to outrun the dead. The foundation of this bizarre estate was poured with blood money. The Winchester Repeating Arms Company revolutionized warfare and westward expansion in the late 19th century. Their flagship product, the lever-action rifle, became known as the gun that won the West. But that staggering industrial success left a trail of countless casualties. Every bullet fired forged a fortune, and every life taken added a heavy coin to a cursed inheritance. Sarah Winchester married into this immense wealth, but her life soon shattered under the weight of profound personal tragedy. In 1866, her infant daughter succumbed to a sudden illness, a devastating blow from which Sarah never recovered. 15 years later, her husband William was taken by tuberculosis. Suddenly, she was left utterly alone, the sole heir to a staggering fortune and an overwhelming, crushing sorrow that began to twist her perception of reality. The immense grief fractured her world, opening a doorway to an inescapable paranormal anxiety. According to persistent legend, a spiritualist medium in Boston offered the grieving widow a chilling revelation. The medium claimed Sarah was cursed, haunted by the thousands of souls whose lives had been violently extinguished by Winchester rifles. The spirits were allegedly seeking vengeance, drawn to the very woman who now held the wealth their deaths had generated. To survive the wrath of these vengeful entities, Sarah was told she must flee her home in New Haven and travel west. In 1884, she arrived in San Jose, California, purchasing a modest 8-room farmhouse. This unassuming plot of land would soon become the epicenter of a frantic, decades-long obsession. She believed that as long as she kept building, the cacophony of construction would confuse the spirits and keep her alive. The relentless expansion began immediately, continuing without pause for 38 years. Teams of carpenters worked in shifts, their hammers ringing out day and night, turning the simple farmhouse into a towering, sprawling anomaly. There was no master blueprint, no cohesive architectural vision. Sarah directed the daily labor herself, sketching erratic designs on scraps of paper and handing them to utterly bewildered foremen who were paid handsomely to ask no questions. The resulting structure was an intentional maze, designed with the sole purpose of trapping and bewildering the unseen forces that pursued her. Hallways twist back upon themselves in dizzying loops, while hidden passages run parallel to main corridors. Sarah believed that by constantly altering the floor plan, she could lose the trailing phantoms in the labyrinth. The home became a battlefield where the living waged a silent war against the dead. The architectural anomalies scattered throughout the property are deeply unsettling in their sheer absurdity. Staircases ascend sharply only to terminate abruptly at the ceiling. Doors open onto solid brick walls, or worse, swing out into thin air, revealing a deadly drop to the gardens below. Cupboards open to reveal secret crawl spaces, and windows are installed in the floor. Every bizarre feature was a calculated trap for confused apparitions. This chaotic design reveals the profound depth of her psychological torment. The sprawling mansion was not a home, but a desperate, elaborate defense mechanism built by a mind under siege. The logic of the living was completely abandoned to accommodate the perceived rules of the afterlife. She slept in a different bedroom each night, navigating the secret passages to ensure that no lingering spirit could trace her path through the darkness. At the very center of this sprawling madness lies the seance room, a small, windowless chamber accessible only by a secret door. It was here that Sarah retreated every night as the clock struck midnight. The air in this cramped space feels remarkably heavy, thick with the residue of countless midnight rituals. She would lock herself inside, seeking guidance from the very entities she spent her days trying to evade. According to the lore surrounding the estate, a bell would toll to summon the spirits, and Sarah would receive her architectural instructions directly from the other side. The unseen forces allegedly dictated the chaotic expansions, ensuring the maze grew ever more complex. It is a chilling paradox. The heiress was taking orders from the phantoms she feared, building them a sprawling, luxurious cage that doubled as her own permanent prison. By the turn of the century, the estate had swelled to a monstrous 7 stories high, a jagged silhouette against the San Jose sky. It boasted hundreds of rooms, thousands of doors, and miles of twisting corridors. The house had become a living, breathing entity, constantly consuming raw materials and expanding its wooden tendrils. It was a monument to guilt and terror, entirely disconnected from the reality of the outside world. The relentless rhythm of construction was violently interrupted in 1906 when a massive earthquake shattered the region. The upper 3 floors of the mansion collapsed in a thunderous roar of splintering wood and shattered glass. Sarah herself was trapped in one of her many bedrooms, crushed beneath the debris for hours until her servants finally managed to pry her free. The disaster left a permanent scar on the sprawling estate. To the terrified heiress, the earthquake was not a natural disaster but a direct, violent message from the spirit world. She believed the phantoms had grown furious with her constant meddling and had shaken the earth to express their wrath. The terrifying ordeal convinced her that the front half of the house, which suffered the most severe damage, had become entirely possessed by dark, uncontrollable entities that could no longer be contained. In response to this perceived supernatural threat, she ordered the damaged front section of the mansion to be permanently sealed off. Doors were boarded up, hallways were blocked, and the ruined rooms were left exactly as they had fallen. This sealed section became a dark, stagnant void within the ever-expanding house. It stood as a silent, forbidden zone, an architectural tomb holding the most aggressive spirits in perpetual darkness. The chaotic symphony of hammers and saws finally fell silent in September of 1922. Sarah Winchester passed away in her sleep at the age of 82, leaving behind a sprawling, unfinished puzzle. The moment the news of her death reached the workers, they dropped their tools and walked away, leaving nails half-driven into the wood. The frantic 38-year attempt to outrun the dead had abruptly and permanently come to an end. Without its creator, the massive estate was suddenly cast into a profound and unsettling silence. The labyrinthine halls, once bustling with the constant motion of carpenters, were now empty and still. Dust began to settle on the bizarre staircases, and shadows lengthened in the windowless corridors. The house, stripped of its original purpose, felt like a massive abandoned machine, its gears frozen in time, yet still humming with a residual, unseen energy. Almost immediately after her passing, unsettling reports began to emerge from those tasked with clearing out the estate. Movers complained of cold drafts in sealed hallways and the distinct sound of footsteps echoing on the floors above them. Doors that had been firmly locked would swing open on their own, and tools left in one room would inexplicably appear in another. The spirits, it seemed, had not vacated the premises. Why does the Winchester Mystery House still harbor such a profound, chilling atmosphere? Some argue that the sheer volume of spiritual energy poured into the foundation created a permanent supernatural imprint. A home designed specifically to interact with the dead may have succeeded far too well. By building a massive, confusing trap for spirits, Sarah may have inadvertently created a permanent spiritual reservoir, anchoring unseen forces to the physical world. Over the decades, visitors and caretakers have documented a steady stream of inexplicable phenomena within the twisting corridors. People report sudden, freezing drops in temperature and the unmistakable feeling of unseen hands tugging at their clothing. Apparitions have been witnessed standing at the end of long, dim hallways, only to vanish into solid walls when approached. The most common report is a pervasive, suffocating sense of being closely and constantly watched. The lingering dread is amplified by the psychological weight of the architecture itself. To walk through the mansion is to step directly into the fractured mind of a woman consumed by grief and fear. The oppressive atmosphere is not merely supernatural, it is deeply emotional. The walls are saturated with decades of paranoia, a palpable sorrow that clings to the intricate woodwork and seeps from the very floorboards of the estate. Deep within the labyrinth, the sealed rooms from the 1906 earthquake remain a focal point of intense, unexplained activity. Those who venture near the boarded-up sections often report hearing muffled voices and the faint, rhythmic sound of a hammer striking wood. It is as if the spectral carpenters are still diligently following their erratic blueprints, eternally expanding the maze long after the heiress who commanded them has turned to dust. The legacy of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company casts a long, inescapable shadow over the property. The wealth that built the endless corridors was undeniably forged in blood and violence. Whether one believes in literal ghosts or not, the house stands as a massive, haunting monument to the devastating cost of that industrial empire. The guilt of a nation's violent expansion was localized, channeled into the frantic construction of a single home. The true horror of the estate lies in its tragic, inescapable irony. Sarah spent her entire life and a staggering fortune building a fortress to keep the dead at bay, yet the twisting hallways and dead-end stairs seem to have achieved the exact opposite. The bizarre architecture did not repel the spirits, it gave them a permanent place to reside. The endless maze became a sanctuary for the very things she feared. Today, the sprawling Victorian mansion sits quietly in San Jose, a bizarre relic of a dark and tragic past. But the silence within its walls is deeply deceptive. The cold drafts, the echoing footsteps, and the labyrinth of useless doors all suggest that the frantic energy of the past has never truly dissipated. The Winchester Mystery House remains haunted not just by the victims of a rifle, but by the endless, enduring architecture of fear.